This is not a, I'm just going to discuss some ideas, some of which are really my own ideas. They're not, they've been published, but they're not like, there's no real extensive theorization around knowledge translation and rigor in HPSR. There's been some work with the methodology reader and with some stray publications. So I'm not going to, please don't look at this as some sort of hard and fast. These are just some ideas, some suggestions from my side around how we can look at knowledge translation differently. So knowledge translation in HPSR. This is just another visual representation of that other diagram. Policy decisions coming from multiple angles, hardware and software interacting with each other, the health system with a social, political and economic context. When we say that HPSR is a change-orientated, policy-orientated field, we want to see all of this researching, all of this giving rise to some change. Yeah. So the knowledge that's created should be useful, should be substantive, and we want that knowledge to be utilized. Yeah? We don't want it to just lie there. So, how successful are we in achieving that? It starts with an opinion is that unfortunately the current understanding of how research influences change is problematic. The very terminology of research to policy suggests that there is a gap, clear distinction between knowledge and action. And in the way we act as researchers and in the way that people act in the system, they tend to follow this kind of logic. So our thoughts and actions tend to mimic this and reinforce this schism or separation. But I believe that the world of knowledge and world of action cannot be neatly separated. Actually, people who are acting on the basis of knowledge. We don't know what that knowledge is, but it's definitely knowledge. They're not just acting out of their, physical reflexes. They are doing something because they are informed by knowledge. And similarly, doing research is not just a cerebral activity. It's not just something you do in your head or on the paper. There's a lot of other things involved in that, and that's all action. You can't just separate these two things. And this is my suggestion that by thinking about ourselves or researchers as being part of the system, by encouraging the field of HPSR to become more people-centered, HPSR can inform health systems change more effectively. So what do I mean by this? What do I mean by becoming more people-centered? 3 ideas under this people-centered view. One is health systems are made up of people. More important than the commodities, more important than the medicines, more important than the infrastructure, organizations, other people. All of whom make decisions. All of whom. They are all decision makers. They are all deciding to get up in the morning and come to work that day, or to stay at home, or to do moonlighting, or to follow guidelines. They are all making decisions. None of those actions are not related to decisions, and those decisions are what shape its performance. And each of these people in the health system, including researchers who are an integral part of the health system, but let's just take, say, who we traditionally call health system actors, all the people in the health system are both sources as well as users of knowledge. They are not just sponges to absorb knowledge. They are also the producers of knowledge, and they are repositories of knowledge. And in fact, in health systems research, they are actually the key repository of knowledge for us. Most of our knowledge comes from people in the system, about the system. Naturally, they are the people in the system, they will be best informed about the system. Not to say that other people won't be well informed about it, but they are a key source of knowledge for us, right? And they are also the users of knowledge. So, within every individual, the social order replicates itself. Within every individual, there is both knowledge as well as the capability to use it. Okay. So this is just a physical diagrammatic representation of the same thing. If you look at this as a sort of a view of people within the system, so you have different types of people: planners, financiers, administrators, researchers I put in there, frontline providers, service users. So again, I'm saying that communities are also part of the system, people who are involved in advocacy. So they are all sources of knowledge about the system, and they are all also users of that knowledge. They all produce and use knowledge in different ways. This is just illustrative to show that it's the same group of people who are both using and who contain knowledge and who can use it. So it's a cycle. Creating knowledge and using it is cyclical, and that cycle can be replicated in each individual. So what does this tell us? What is the role of the researcher then in this setting? If it was so simple that there is a cycle of research availability and research utilization within each individual, then why do we need to go through this complicated process of doing research, publishing it, hoping that somebody will read your paper and expecting it to get taken up in policy? If it's already there in the same people with whom we are expecting it, and in the same environment, in the same context, what is the role of the researcher then? What is the need for existence of the researcher? Yeah. Now let's think about that. And this is your conventional view. So the researchers are in red. The conventional view is that they do all of that. They research the system. They go talk to people, find out their knowledge. They research them, find out about the system, gather data, and they produce knowledgeable papers. And they use that knowledge somehow to inform policy choices. Yeah, this is your conventional view. If you look at the policy life cycle or the policy planning cycle or any of those things, knowledge, monitoring and implementation gives rise to knowledge which you use to inform policy, which then becomes implemented, which then you monitor. So this is your conventional view of research as informing policy choices. So what I am saying is that actually there's a lot more to it. Researchers are not only here at the top, informing the policymaker at the top. They are actually mingled throughout the system. They can interface with a range of different people. They are part of society. They talk to communities. They talk to providers. They talk to, in both professional and social settings, they are part of the system in various different ways. They are also users of services. Everybody is a user of service at some point, no? So researchers have actually multiple opportunities, both professionally and socially. Let's focus on the professional aspects. Let's put aside the social aspect. Even professionally, the very act of doing health systems research, you need to interact with various people in the system. So there are other ways in which you can act to promote the cycle of good creation and utilization of knowledge. You can synthesize and analyze knowledge. So you can gather knowledge from all those different people. A lot of HPSR is about that. Interview a range of people within the system, find out what's happening, and you synthesize it. You have particular skills which nobody else has, which is to be able to collate that research, make it meaningful, interpret it, and present it in a way that's meaningful and understandable. So that's one function the researcher can play. You can also change the conversation. If you don't like the way certain policy debates are taking place, you can play a role of an activist and change the way the questions are being asked. Don't ask, why are you not following the guidelines? Ask, are the guidelines appropriate to be followed? That's a way of reframing the debate. So researchers can play a valuable role in that. They can be allies of service providers in doing that, or allies of communities in asking that. Don't ask, why are our top-down implementation mechanisms not working? Ask, what can community-based monitoring do to assist in holding systems accountable for following guidelines? That's a different question. You've reframed the debate. Don't ask, why do doctors not go to villages? Ask, what about those guys who've stuck their necks out and are in the villages? What is special about them? You change the conversation. You can also promote reflection and learning. So by being in touch with people in the system, by being empathetic with them, even if you disagree with them, by engaging with them in different ways, and by talking about these systems issues with them. Just the act of doing research, often you need to talk and you need to explain. So those should not be seen as just procedures that have to be completed. in doing that, in engaging, you are performing a useful function. You are helping people to think about a problem in a systematic way. So you can promote reflection and learning among people in the system. So go out there in the community, spread the word, write popular articles, talk to people socially, stimulate thinking about that. You're one of the few people who is actually thinking systematically about some issue. So you can actually stimulate a lot of thinking on that. And this one that I mentioned earlier, promote the inclusion of excluded voices. So see whose voice is not getting heard in the health system. Usually, of course, we know that marginalized communities, users of care, their voices are not heard in the system. So that's well established. But there are other people also whose voices never get heard. The middle managers, the frontline providers, very rarely do people ask them, what do you think? Or what are your constraints? What are you faced with? It's not unreasonable for doctors not to go to rural areas given the conditions that they are expected to work in. So in some cases, some places they are given good conditions, but many places they are not. And they are subjected to very unfair environments in those places. It's worthwhile finding out their situation, their context as well. Why should one injustice be replaced with another? And through all of this cycle can be perpetuated. So it's idealistic, yes, but these are all ways in which I think researchers can change the way they think about their practice. Sometimes it's not even just, I'm not saying go out there and do all these things, but think about your practice in terms of doing all these things, not in terms of just doing one thing, not just in terms of informing policy choices. Think about it, empower yourself, think that what you're doing is actually a composite of all these things, not just this. And then you may not actually need to do a lot more, you may just need to do things slightly differently and things you're already doing. So just quickly notes on rigor and ethics in HPSR. I'm not going to separate rigor and ethics because I'll explain why I think quality and ethics are intrinsically interconnected. So first I'm just going to start off with 4 core principles. They're not core principles, I think these are 4 important principles to consider when doing HPSR. And these reflect both on rigor as well as on ethics. System, being systematic. And being systematic not just means collecting, analyzing and interpreting data in a systematic way, but also demonstrating it. You should write down exactly how you collected that data, analyzed it and interpreted it. Write personal reflections, keep notes. What was your experience of interpreting the data? How did you make a decision to interpret it this way and not that way? So that way somebody who's reading the document will read your methodology notes at the side and they will see that you have demonstrated why you took particular decisions. So that's being truly systematic. And then they can see the logic of why you have done something in a particular way. Reflexivity, sensitivity to the role of the researcher and the research process in influencing the way the data is collected or interpreted. So be aware that you are influencing things as you are doing research. You are not powerless. In fact, you can be very powerful. And you can also have your own incentives and politics and a range of things involved in that. You're not some neutral external person. It's very important to ensure that the views of a particular group or groups are not presented as the sole truth about a situation. Credibility. Okay, so this is an important one, maybe a bit more relevant to the qualitative methods. The others are relevant across the board. Ensuring the compatibility of the constructed realities that exist in the minds of the respondents with those that are attributed to them. When you actually do qualitative research, it will become very apparent why this is important. So this is what I was referring to about the layers of interpretation. There is a reality. When you interview somebody about it, yeah, they present their interpretation of that reality. And then you write it up and you present in a way your own interpretation of that person's interpretation, right? What credibility is that your interpretation should actually be very close to that other person's interpretation. You shouldn't be misrepresenting that person. Okay, so then just coming to a more sort of detailed set of questions that researchers can ask themselves. Yeah, so when you are doing your research, ask yourself these questions. Does my methodology match my question? That's very crucial. Have I applied parameters that are appropriate to my methodology? Parameters of quality. So the word sample size really does not have much bearing in much qualitative research. Even the word sample doesn't have much significance. On the other hand, credibility does not have any significance for surveys. You're just asking simple objective questions. There's no question about credibility. So don't apply the wrong parameter for quality to the wrong type of methodology. Respect for knowledge ecology. What is the existing knowledge on the issue? Go beyond standard literature search tools. If poorly explored, make sure that your research has an initial exploratory component. At the most, just talk to 4 or 5 people and find out. Just do some sort of scoping. Policy mindedness. Have I considered consequences of application of findings in context, intended and unintended, and not just for the health sector but for other sectors or for other priorities? It's a big ask. And this is the reflexivity piece. Think about yourself. Have I thought about my own interest and approach in the topic? Why am I interested in the subject? What draws me to the subject? What is my own value basis and philosophical basis? Who am I doing this for? Has somebody influenced my research, and how? What is my power? What is my power in the health system? What's my position? And at the end of the day, while recognizing that we are interconnected and part of the health system, we also need to have autonomy of ideas. We can't just be driven by people around us. Researcher autonomy is crucial. Some more thoughts about what you can actually do. This is another quality aspect. Importance of foregrounding human qualities. So this idea of people-centered HPSR. The other research advance the understanding of human attributes of systems. Does it go beyond our understanding of the system as the machine? Does it address complexity? Does the research acknowledge equity, justice, and power? It doesn't have to actively address it, but it needs to acknowledge it. And have I located the subject in its broader social, political, and economic context? So I'm just closing with some, this is not ethical principles, but these are just examples of ethical problems that commonly arise in HPSR. Yeah. So again, I'm just going to leave this here, and we can stop because we are out of time. But again, just to emphasize that the points about quality that I made are also points about ethics. They're not separable. If you want, I can get some more readings on ethics of health systems research and be happy to put them up online.